The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Content of the IEP, presented by Shirley Swope. My name is Pam Christie, PTI Director at Peak Parent Center. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. If you are connected to today's webinar through the internet, you should see your attendee interface or control panel in the upper right-hand corner of your own computer's desktop. By default, you are listening in to today's webinar using your computer's speaker system. If you'd prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane of your control panel and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter and myself by typing your questions in either the questions pane or the chat pane. You may send your questions in at any time during the presentation, and I will be monitoring the questions and will address them as we go and if we have time at the end. There's 5 handouts available for download in the handout window. One of those handouts is this PowerPoint. As you leave today's webinar, you will receive an evaluation survey about the presentation. We would appreciate if you would take just a minute to complete that and provide your feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email very soon that has today's webinar. So welcome to today's webinar, Content of the IEP. It's my pleasure to introduce Shirley, who will take it from here.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, a continuation from last week's webinar. And in the first webinar, we talked about preparing for the IEP and what happens kind of before we actually sit down and have a meeting together. And today we're going to look at the content, what needs to be in that individualized education program. And then next week, we'll talk about what happens after we have the meeting and how we follow up and implement the plan. So in part 1, we talked about the purpose of the law, which were the evaluations. The purpose of the law is that any child who has a disability and qualifies for special education services can have an individualized education program. And we determined that through evaluations to see if a child is eligible for an IEP. Then we talked about the team members, parents, not less than 1 regular education teacher, not less than 1 special education teacher, and a school representative who knows the resources of the district and can commit district funds if needed. And then a person who can explain the evaluations, even if it was not the person who actually gave the evaluations, but could explain them, like a speech therapist can explain the speech therapy evaluation, and a psychologist can explain a psychological evaluation, but they can't explain, psychologists can't do speech, speech can't do psychology. Then we talked about related staff who might be invited. They're not required, but they're invited, and the student and others who know the student well. Okay. And for some reason, I'm not going forward here. Pam, we're having a glitch.
Well, we are going to figure this out together.
Okay. I think I'm frozen.
You think you're frozen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I will get my PowerPoint up, Shirley.
Okay.
And we'll go from there. So please bear with us, everybody. We're having some technical difficulties.
Isn't life fun at times?
I didn't have that up on my desktop, so my apologies. I'm looking for it right now. Maybe this is a good opportunity for you all to look through those handouts that I have.
Or to ask questions.
Or to ask questions. If anybody has questions, put it in chat.
Yeah, you can answer any questions. But I'm not moving. If I knew the words to Frozen, I could start singing it right now.
Okay, so hold on a second. Now we're going to share my screen and then
Ah, yay, Pam.
yeah, we'll see.
This will work. So we'll go down to 4.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience.
I love technology when it works. So now we're going to look at the content of the IEP. And in the content of the IEP, we're going to look at your present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. It's really important to look at both aspects. Academic achievement is just that. Where are we academically? And are we grade level? Are we below grade level? Are we above grade level? You know, how are we doing academically? But that's not the only factor that you look at. And sometimes parents will say, well, he didn't qualify because his grades were too good. It's more than just grades. It's also that functional performance. And functional performance is, how do you interact with other kids? It's behavior, it's organizational skills, it's that executive functioning, it's your anxiety, it's all those other factors that go into going to school and functioning at school at grade level with your peers. That is just as important as your academic achievement. So some children who might be twice exceptional, they're gifted in an area, but they have trouble functioning at school at grade level. And so that functioning is really important. So you always want to look at your academic achievement and functional performance. Then we're going to look at measurable annual goals. And so these goals have to be written so that there's a measure that we can tell we have made progress during the year. Here is our starting point, our present levels, and we're going to move from there forward. So it has to be a way that we can measure that forward movement. And then a description of a child's progress. What are they doing during the school year to meet those annual goals? And those are those progress reports. And it's, we'll talk about that because we want to keep track. Are we making progress? We don't want to be surprised at the end of the year. Oh, we didn't make enough progress, or we didn't make progress, or we made progress, but we didn't make as much as we thought we were going to make. Or we met that goal in 2 weeks. Boy, did we underestimate that. And then a statement of the special education or related services with the use of supplementary aids and services. And those supplementary aids and services are the supports that are meant to be in the general ed classroom. So we're going to look at that and talk at that. Next slide. So when we look at the content of the IEP, we're going to look at what modifications or accommodations need to be made to support the child in this educational setting. Any explanation as to why the child cannot participate, because our assumption is this child is going to participate with their non-disabled peers in regular education and excuse me. Oh, we're all working from home. This is an exhausting day today, isn't it? I apologize for that. And we're going to look at if a child can't participate, because the assumption is the child will participate in regular education classes and in extracurricular activities and non-academic activities if that child so wishes to do that with support. So the child is a general education student first. Any activity that is offered to a general education student is to be offered to a child on an IEP. And then we're going to look at when do these services start and how do we measure it to see if they actually work. Next slide, please. So we want to look at a child's strengths. So what we start with, you're not going to have an IEP without a need. We know that. That's why they have IEPs, to list, to support the needs of learning. But we want to build on and recognize the child's strengths. It's really important to do that because that gives us the hook to hook a child into school. That supports the ego and the being of the child wanting to be at school if we utilize and if we really recognize the child's strengths. Here's an example of Mario. He likes reading chapter books. He likes to read books about sports. He likes to write mystery stories. He works well in group. He can remember information he's heard. And he likes karate, things like that. All of that's important. Next slide. So when we look at the content, we also look at the child's needs, because we wouldn't be writing an IEP if the child didn't have an academic need. So they have first these kind of skills: academic skills, behavioral skills, social skills. Well, academic achievement needs, behavioral, social, those are those functional performance skills. Independent living skills as they get older, and job-related skills as they get older. I once had a mom who was really angry because she was told her child needed occupational therapy. And it was a kindergartner, and she said, "My child doesn't need a job. Why would he need occupational therapy?" So sometimes it's just the language that gets in the way. So of knowing what those skills are that the children need. Needs, we really talk about children who have visual impairments or hearing impairments, because if you have visual impairments, you're going to have a literacy need. Does the child need Braille? Does the child need large print? Does the child need audiobooks? What kind of, how are we going to get information into this child, written information into this child? For a child with a hearing impairment or hearing loss or deafness, it might be a communication need. Does this child use hearing aids and his voice for speaking? Does this child need an interpreter? Does this child need sign language? So there's special needs for children that specifically have some kind of visual or hearing loss. And then English language learning needs. Just because you're a child whose English is your second language does not qualify you for special education. But you can be a child who speaks another language first at home, and you also have a disability. So you have to look carefully at that. And we're always looking at action and child-focused descriptions, not on what's wrong with the child. It's not a deficit, it's a need. Next slide. So here is an example of Mario who has a need. He needs to fluently decode words with more than one syllable, and he needs to read at grade level. We want him to read at grade level eventually. I mean, that's our ultimate big picture goal, perhaps, but we've got to get there in steps. Jamie needs an opportunity to communicate and engage in age-appropriate activities with non-disabled peers, not Jamie needs friends. It would be nice if Jamie had friends, and we'd like Jamie to have friends, but that's not a goal. The goal is, what skill does Jamie need to get there so that Jamie can eventually make friends? Next slide, please. Then the content of the IEP, annual goals, so that are met. Needs, the student needs to be making progress in general education curricula. That's in the law. It's not like you're going to be some children have a very unique curriculum. However, it's still based in the standards of the subject matter that they're studying. And I apologize for my dogs. Hang on one second. I hope there are people out there who can relate to working at home and having interruptions during the day, and I apologize. Anyway, so we're going to look at general ed curriculum because that's a really important area, and that's where we want to be making progress. But we need to have a way to measure them. So next slide, please. So when IDEA 2004 requires measurable annual goals, including in that functional area, academics are pretty easy to measure. Sometimes it gets a little more challenging when we're looking at functional performance goals, but they too need to have a measure to them that means something, because sometimes behavior is the challenge of the child to make progress. If you get kicked out of math class, it's really hard to make progress in math. So we need to look at these 5 critical elements. The student, what's the behavior, and to what level or degree, and under what conditions, and in what length of time. Sometimes we misjudge behavior because he's always out of his chair. He's always disruptive every single minute of the day. But when you measure it, when you take a measure of that, the student is only disruptive when he's required to do math. And it's only in math class. And it's only at the end of class when he's required to do work. And so sometimes we misjudge the perception of the behavior. But when we actually document it and measure it, it's not what we think. So next slide, please. So we want to make, when we're writing goals, we want to make SMART goals. We want to be specific. What do you want your child to be able to do? And what do you want your child to be able to do in what amount of time? And how are we going to measure that? what are we going to require that child to do? And is it realistic, and does it really meet this child's need? There's a web source that I like, and many people do, and it's called WrightsLaw, WRIGHTSLAW.com. And WrightsLaw.com is a great resource for parents to really understand aspects of special education and what's required of special education. And in WrightsLaw, there's a book called From Emotions to Advocacy. And this is chapter 12 of the book From Emotions to Advocacy, and it's online. So next slide, please. So here's an example of an annual goal. Mario needs to decode words with more than one syllable, and that he's going to read it a 5th grade text 95% of the time with 75 words per minute. And right now, his baseline, or that academic achievement and functional performance, he reads 3rd grade text at 97% accuracy with 68 words per minute. So we know what we're shooting for. Can we measure it? Yeah, we're going to be able to count the words he reads per minute. And we're going to know what level, grade level of text he's reading. So we have a measure there that we can count on. Next slide, please. So is this annual goal measurable? Mario will improve his writing skills and be measured by teacher observation. That's kind of iffy because, you know, what if she's teacher observation for some things is really valid if you're really keeping track of it. But in what length of time? And where's our starting point? And where's our ending point? Monica will learn multiplication facts 0 to 12, and this will be measured by written and oral testing. Okay, we have something very specific. Instead of just improving writing skills, Monica's going to learn facts, math facts 0 to 12, and she's going to have a test by a teacher. So yeah, that's pretty good. John will improve his ability to stay on task and pay attention. This will be measured by teacher observation. Once again, you know, that's kind of iffy because how many times is he going to stay on task, and what amount of time is he going to stay on task? And what if the teacher's in a really bad mood and just saying, oh, he's never staying on task, he never does. Once again, we need to chart it. We need a way to measure. Next slide, please. Okay, short-term objectives are not part of the law for a student who's taking the standardized test of the general education population. However, if you're on your own kind of, if you take alternative assessments, then you're required to have short-term objectives for your goals. You can ask for short-term objectives, but short-term objectives are supposed to be sort of covered under that measure and under that reporting out to parents. But for some students, we're going to have really specific short-term objectives because our goals are so different in the general education curriculum. They just help guide or have a roadmap to where we're going. Next slide. So that monitoring of goals and progress, that is really important because that's going to tell you, does this work? Are we going down the right path? And how will this child's progress be measured? So are we going to measure it through just standardized testing? Are we going to measure it through teacher observation? And if it's teacher observation, what specifically is the teacher observing, and how often is the teacher observing it? And who's going to measure it? Is it going to be someone coming into the classroom? Is it going to be the speech therapist working on her goals. She'll measure speech therapy goals. Is it the teacher's aides going to track some kind of behavior or some kind of progress like that? And how often will the parents receive this progress report? A progress report should happen as often as the general population of the student body gets a report card. So if your child gets a report card every 9 weeks, you should get a report on specifically progress towards the IEP goals. And it's not just a checklist, making progress, and then all of a sudden did not meet the goal. And the parent says, well, he was making progress the whole year. How do you mean he's not making the goal? It's, well, he didn't make enough progress. So it needs to be more detailed than a check mark of making progress. Could be, we're making progress, it's slower than I thought it was going to be. We're making progress and he's progressing faster than we thought he was going to. And he met the goal in third quarter, not fourth quarter. Or he's not going to meet the goal, but we're almost there. So it gives you an idea of, what kind of supports you need to put in place for the child for teaching, for one thing. And the things that we do have in place, are they working? So it's really important that that progress report is a major form of communication between teachers and parents, but for all members of the IEP team. And how is it going to be delivered? Well, you can, you talk about that at the IEP meeting. If they say, we'll put it in Johnny's backpack and he can hand it to you when he gets home. Well, one of his issues is organizational skills. Don't put it in a backpack because maybe the backpack won't even come home. Or he's reading it and going, ooh, I don't like that. I'm not going to show that to mom. So, how can you get that progress report in a safe way? So mail, email, sent home with student. But if it's sent home with student, I would really question that. Not that I don't trust the student, but we want to make sure that the parents get it. Then when we're looking at special education related services and supplementary aids and services, based on peer-reviewed research to the extent that it's practical. So it includes supports for extracurricular and non-academic activities. So sometimes they go, well, he can't, play basketball. He's in, he can't do that. Well, yeah, he can try out for basketball and he can be supported in basketball with some kind of supplementary aid or service. It can be a person, it can be equipment, it can be the coach. But you talk about that and say, no, he really wants to play basketball. I know one young man who had Down syndrome, well, still does have Down syndrome, but when he was in school, he loved to wrestle. And he was on the wrestling team. It was a non-cut sport. So they could not say, I'm sorry, you can't wrestle. It was, he was supported in wrestling and he competed with his teammates in wrestling. So, and he loved it. Just because you have an IEP or just because you have a disability doesn't mean that excludes you from the rest of the school's activities. So if you're told, well, we're going to have a field trip and you must go because we don't have anybody to support your child, you go, well, you need to find somebody to support my child because legally you have to do that. And if you want to go, that's great. You can go on your child's field trip. Just know that your child is entitled to that field trip, whether or not you can attend the field trip. So just say in the IEP meeting, let's talk about support for field trips. What field trips does the fourth grade, take? Do they go to the zoo in the spring? Not this year, but do they go to the zoo in the spring? Well, if you're going to go to the zoo in the spring, then somebody needs to be, you need to make sure that you're in a bus or a van that is wheelchair accessible, because my child uses a wheelchair, and someone will be needed to help my child access the zoo. So you can talk about that at IEP meetings, and it's a great time to do that. At the IEP meeting, say, what excursions or what field trips is the class going to have this year? Because we need to, plan ahead and make sure that this child is supported during that activity. A lot of times, schools between 5th grade and middle school will have a summer camp or a couple of days where they go to a camp. That child with an IEP is entitled to go to the camp with support, but it needs to be planned. So talk about that. And then, how do we instruct this child? What's the best way to teach? That's been shown to be really effective. And you can talk about that. It's not just, well, this is how we do it here, so take it or leave it. No, it's like, how does this approach benefit my child? A lot of children, parents who have children with dyslexia, worry about what kind of reading instruction they're going to have. You can talk about that. You can ask about that. Is this reading instruction, is this reading program, has it been shown to be effective? Is there scientific research that shows this reading approach is effective for children with dyslexia? You can absolutely ask that question. Next slide. So accommodations. Most children get some kind of accommodation throughout their school career at some time or another. And it's simply changing how the student receives instructions, or how they learn, or how they give it back. How do we get information in? How does the student share the information out? So that's an accommodation. So you might have a student who's 8th grade but reading at a 4th grade level. How are they going to access an 8th grade math book? How are they going to access an 8th grade science book? So they may be receiving accommodations for that written material somehow, to make sure that they get the information, because they can understand the information. They just can't read the information. So we're going to change how that student receives that information. And then to share it out. There was a illustration or a little story that was told to me years ago, and it was a boy went to the Grand Canyon and he saw it, and he said, "Oh, this is magnificent. It's so awesome. It's so soul inspiring. Look at the colors, look at the depth of it, look at the breadth of it. I'm going to tell my grandfather." And he wrote a postcard and it said it was good. So sometimes we really have to remember there's a lot more inside that can't get out because we have an obstruction in reading or writing. And we want to make sure that that student can express themselves fully. And it might require an accommodation. And you have accommodations through those supplementary aids and services to participate in general education activities and curriculum. So if you just need to make sure all the way through, how are they being supported in reading? How are they being supported in math? How are they being supported in science? Are they participating in sports day at school? Are they participating in all the field trips? Does my student want to join drama club? Does my student want to try out for basketball? So assume everything that a general education student has access to, a student with an IEP has access to it also. And in this right now in our COVID-19, pandemic, it's really important to talk about, look at your IEP and talk about accommodations, but also, the accommodated work that many students are receiving online. So it's not just you get the 5th grade packet of work. If you had accommodated work before, you get accommodated work during this time also. So you may need to talk with your special ed teacher, you may need to talk with the principal or the director of special education and say, here's what works for us, here's what's not working for us. How are we going to kind of make the shift for this student's individual needs? So just remember, if you're learning at home, and the whole state is, if you're learning at home right now, if your child had accommodations before, they can have accommodations now. The accommodations may look different because the need is different, because the environment's different. But look at that and say, how do we need to accommodate this student's learning right now at home? You can amend the IEP if you want to. However, most schools are really making adjustments for students to accommodate them in the way they need to be accommodated. But parents are vital at this point because parents are the teachers at this point. So keep track of that. This works, this doesn't, this program works, this program doesn't work for my student. Or my student really can't see the small keyboard, I need something bigger, or just keep track of what's working and what's not working, and then talk with your school team about it. Everyone's stressed, especially with dogs today, but everyone's stressed, and we just need to make accommodations and keep our flexibility handy and work on our patience. And next slide. Modifications are when we're changing the content. Accommodations, we expect the student to learn the same content, only in a different way. With modifications, we can change the content. We can change what the student is learning. So if you have a student who is in 10th grade and they need to do algebra, but they can only do, 5th grade math, that's a modification, and that's something you need to talk about. So when you're changing the core of what's being taught, you can still participate in general education and all the activities and extracurricular activities and all of that. You can still do that. And especially in high school, if you have a student who has modifications to an academic subject, but made the basketball team, made the football team, made the tennis team, and then the school saying, well, what about grades? Your grade is going to be based on your IEP and IEP subject, in that they can't disqualify your student from playing a sport because your student can't be at grade level in some subject. So that's something too that you need to talk about if you are in that situation with a high school student. You change it if the student requires modifications to the state standards and may require an alternate assessment. So you have some students who really are on a truly individualized plan of learning life skills. They can still participate in general education. They can still be supported in general education. It's just very different from what the other students are learning. So you need to understand that alternate assessment. And now you need to understand, especially when you're in high school, a question that you really need to ask is, I have a student with modifications to the IEP in their core subjects. How does that affect graduation? and what kind of diploma will my child receive. Your goal is to have a general education diploma. So we have different state requirements now. So you really need to ask that question if you have a high schooler. Will my child graduate with a general education diploma, or what will my child receive at the end of their school? So you need to have a good understanding of that at the very beginning of their high school career. Next slide. So then we look at the dates and services and modifications, when all of this is going to start, how often, where is it going to take place, and for how long. So the assumption is it starts the day after you have your IEP, and your IEP is, we all go, okay, let's go, let's do it. So that's when it starts. You may require a little extra time if you have ordered a piece of equipment, if you need to change a bus route, if you need some kind of change like that, that might require a little bit of time. So if that's the case, right in there, you know, when will the standard for my student come to the school? 2 weeks? Okay, I'm going to check back in 2 weeks and make sure that things get going here. And sometimes parents have to keep on top of things like that, only because the parents are the watchdog of their student's IEP. Schools have many students with IEPs. They have many, you know, different directions to go here. So it's the parent's job to gently nag if that's required, but to be the watchdog of the IEP and not to be frustrated or mad if things don't instantly happen, because they may be thinking of other students' needs. So, but just make sure that the IEP is going to be followed within reason and in a reasonable amount of time, and follow up on that. And don't say, what? It never happened, and then get mad at them. You should be on top of it and say, you know, it's been 2 weeks. Where is the equipment that we ordered? And who's going to check on it? And I'll call back tomorrow to see, you know, what progress is being made towards getting it. And if teachers are to make modifications or accommodations, especially accommodations, the general education teacher needs to know that this student requires accommodations and what accommodations are going to happen within the classroom and what their obligation is to make those accommodations for the student, and who's going to do the modification or who's going to do the accommodation. So you might be in the IEP meeting and they say, yes, you know, we're going in English, we're going to make an accommodation of, he'll be able to have books on tape and then give oral book reports. Well, who's responsible for that? Is the English teacher responsible to acquire the, you know, audio book, or is the special ed teacher responsible for that? So ask, who's going to do that? Who's going to be responsible for that? And then, you know, who's going to be responsible for checking to make sure that those accommodations start? And if the teachers can coordinate and work together, so the English teacher may be going, we're reading Moby Dick, you know, you may want to find a book that's at a lower reading level so he can read it and get the gist of it, or should he watch the old movie or something. When my son was in high school, he has a hearing loss, and English was always a little difficult for him, but he had an accommodation of, if there were any movies shown, that they would be captioned, or else he would not be responsible for the content of that movie. And so they had to figure out, how are we going to get it into him? Well, as a sophomore in high school, they were studying Shakespeare, which is not easy if language doesn't come easily to you. but the teacher was great. And she had a favorite movie of King Richard, I think it was, one of the, where they killed a lot of people with swords and stuff. And anyway, she said but it wasn't captioned. And she knew that was an accommodation that needed to happen. So she sat at the back of the room with my son, and with her finger or a bookmark, she followed along the dialogue in the play. And he came home all excited. He enjoyed it. And he said, you know, those actors, they almost said the exact same words that were in the book. Well, yeah, it was Shakespeare. So that was an easy accommodation that she came up with herself because she wanted to show that movie to the class. So sometimes you have to be creative in how you provide that information and who's going to do it. So that's the important thing. Don't assume. Don't assume that teachers know that there's a responsible for things, and don't assume that the special ed teacher thinks that the teachers are responsible for things. It's best to have that conversation. Next. So when you reach the age of, beginning at the age, federally at the age of 16, in Colorado, that age is the year in which you turn 15. You're going to start looking at transition components to your IEP. And it generally is around the freshman year in high school. And so at that point, the student will be issued an invitation to come to the IEP meeting to participate in the IEP meeting with and be a member of the team. Parents can decide whether or not they want the student there the whole time or they want the student there. The student can come or not come. They're invited. They're not, you can't make somebody attend. However, we certainly encourage high schoolers and younger to attend their IEP meeting, because the more buy-in you get from the student around this, the more power you give to the student in their own learning, the better the outcome. And so when we're looking at that, we're looking at your education, what you're going to do after school. You're looking at, do you want to learn a trade? You know, what do you think you're going to do for a job? Of course, nobody really knows at that age, but this is the age to start exploring those options. And then what about independent living skills? You know, are you going to live on your own? Are you going to need somebody to live with you and help you function every day? So we're going to look at all those components at the age of when you start talking about transition into adulthood. Next slide. So you're going to look at, you know, is college an option? What kind of post-secondary education do you want to have? Do you want to learn a trade? Do you want to, you know, go to college? What do you want to do? You know, what's out there? And so you really start looking at different options to kind of see where they want to go. There are a lot of students who say, I want to play pro basketball, or, you know, I want to be a movie star and a major singer. It's a starting place. And no one should say, oh, well, you can never do that. Don't say that. Say, oh, well, that's interesting. Let's explore some more. So you got to start someplace. And so everybody has big dreams. And then everybody has, everyone should think, well, sure, I can shoot for that. I can try for that. And then you go from there. So between 18 and 21, generally the student is in a really looking at a transition kind of program for them that's individualized. And it could involve, you know, going to school. It could involve having a job coach. It could involve some kind of training that they are interested in. And then they may require services from like vocational rehabilitation or the community center board of their area. That agency can be invited to the IEP meeting. Doesn't mean they're required to attend, but they can be invited. Next. So we want to also look at accessible instructional materials. You know, how are you going to teach this kid? What are you going to use? What kind of motivations are you going to use for him to really help him understand? I got a kid who really learns hands-on. How can we get math across to him by using things that are really hands-on? So, you know, how can we use these materials at the same time that the other children are receiving their instruction also? And what they've discovered, and now they have a term for it, it's called Universal Design for Instruction. And Universal Design for Instruction really came about partly because teachers were trying to teach kids who learn in different ways, and they came up with different ways for instruction. Wow, I had it for this kid who really learns hands-on, but Johnny over there really likes it too, and he's my A, plus student. This must work for all kids. So looking at just those good ways to teach kids. Next slide. So you can change the IEP if it's not working throughout the year. At one point with my son, we decided that he could learn sign language because it'd be a good second language. He was not interested, but he took sign language lessons in the summer before his entering seventh grade. And along with my niece, who's the very same age as him, and me. And she was great at it. He was okay because he's very visual. He was okay at it too. But when we got into the school setting, he said, I don't want it. I don't need it. I'm not going to do it. And get that person away from me, basically. So we had to amend his IEP to take our very well thought out adult decision out of it and look at what was really going to work for him. And so amending the IEP can work. You may have great ideas and you may think, well, this is going to be wonderful, and not so much when you get down to it. So if the parent and school agree, or you see, this is what we really need. We found something that works for him. Gosh, we need to put that in the IEP. Then put it in the IEP. So you can amend the IEP if the parent and school agree. And if parents need to help write the amendments. I mean, parents are an equal member of the IEP team. So yeah, they need to be involved in the whole concept, in the whole process of writing and changing the IEP. And then all the other team members need to be informed of the changes. So not everybody needs to come and show up, but parents have to show up. And then once everybody agrees and the amendments are made, then the other members of that IEP team need to be told about it and shown that, yeah, it is. And then parents, you have to request a copy of the IEP with amendments. So at that point you say, can I send me a complete new copy that includes the amendments? I need to have a copy of that. And really everybody who's serving the child should be aware of those and have a copy of it also. We just need to stay on top of that. Next slide. So carefully consider before agreeing to amend the IEP without all the team members. You may think, well, we're just going to amend this one little section in around his language goal or speech goal or something like that. Well, maybe the basketball coach needs to know that because they're working on something, or he's aware and he's really trying to help with speech. So, is this going to affect the other team members? and we just weren't thinking about that. So just think about it carefully. Next. Then monitor your emotions. It's okay. It's a natural part of the human experience because you're talking about somebody who's near and dear to you and that you love dearly. Teachers like your children. They want them to do well. They love their own children. And so sometimes the emotions get in the way of the meeting. So take care of yourself, breathe, remember, okay, we're going to get through this and we're all in this together because we're all looking for the greater good for this student. Next. So if you need to, have a friend or an advocate go with you to the meeting, we always recommend that you take somebody. My sister used to go with me to the IEP meetings all the time. And then you can't say, and one parent is great at this, she said, I just said, I need to take a break and we need to stop for a couple of minutes. And then she went out into the hallway and she took some deep breaths and got herself under control. And she said it really worked because I was getting so, agitated. Then she could come back in and finish the meeting. You can tape record the meeting so you don't have to remember everything. It's legal in our state. As long as one person in the room knows it's being tape recorded, it's legal. It works well to tell everyone they're being recorded. That's considerate and it's team building, not team destroying. So if you do tape record, just say I'm recording this so I can listen to it later, or I can share it with my mother, or I can share it with my husband, or I can just have a record of it. And then the school may also want to have their own recording, which is fine. Once it does help kind of ease that I've got to remember everything, or what did they say? When my sister would go with me, we would hear different things and we were at the same meeting. So drink some water, that's really important. And especially in our altitude, it's really important, but also it helps your body maintain its equilibrium. Remember to take deep breaths, breathe in, breathe out, and that helps you also calm down. And it also helps you think. Your brain needs that oxygen. Keep the focus on helping your child. It's not, they're not out to get you, you're not out to get them, or to prove people wrong or right or whatever. The focus is on the child, and it always should be on the child. And are they saying things that are helpful to the child? What's their ultimate goal? Their ultimate goal is to see your child make progress. That's their ultimate goal. They may have a different path that you don't like or you don't think it's going to work, but just know that the intent with which that's offered is to help your child. And ask for time to think about making big decisions. I think it's always wise when you can say at the end of the meeting, you've given me a lot to think about, I'll get back to you. It takes the pressure off. It takes the pressure off of you making snap decisions. It takes the pressure off of you just in your attitude. It takes the pressure off. So just remember that you can always say, you've given me a lot to think about. I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you in 2 days. Next. So here are tips. Know when your signature matters, and we talked about this last week. Your signature matters when you are giving permission for the IEP to start services. Always sign the attendance sheet. And always know that the IEP team includes parents. Be smart about your SMART goals. Look at it. Do they make sense? And to remember to call and ask us anytime. Another thing about the signature, you do not have to sign that I agree with this IEP every single time you have an IEP meeting. After you've signed that very first IEP, you've signed, yes, the school has permission to provide services. It doesn't mean you agree or disagree with the document. So if you don't agree with it, there's a process. But if just know your signature has nothing to do with agreeing or disagreeing with that document at that time. Next. So Pam, we're at 1 o'clock. We
Yes.
had some delays in there.
Yes. Yes. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Shirley. A few people had some questions. If you could please contact any parent advisor after this webinar. Due to our technical difficulties, we are unable to answer questions at this time. As soon as we are able to add captions to this webinar recording, we will post it on our website. And to request a certificate of completion, please email me, Pam Christie at PCHRISTY@PEAKPARENT.org. That's pchristie@peakparent.org. Thank you to our wonderful presenter, Shirley, and to everyone attending. We hope you join us for our third in our IEP webinar series, implementation of the IEP next week. As you can see here on the screen, this is a good way to reach Peak Parent Center. Peak also offers webinars. We have parent advisors in Spanish and English. We have regional parent connectors across the state. We offer workshops across the state. And please save the date for our annual conference on inclusive education, February 18th and 19th, 2021 in Denver. And just so you all know, Peak is a nonprofit, and we rely on donations from generous donors like you to be able to deliver webinars like this. So please consider making a donation online at www.peakparent.org/donate. So again, if you have any questions, please contact any parent advisor at Peak, www.peakparent.org, 719-531-9400. Your email is parentadvisor@peakparent.org. Again, as you exit that webinar, please take a moment to complete our evaluation survey as we value your feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email, so look for that. We are offering dispute resolution webinar series starting next week. So please look at our Peak's website for details. And on behalf of Peak Parent Center and Shirley, thank you so much for joining, and have a good rest of your day.
And thank you for your tolerance of my dogs.
Yes, thank you.